Now, the old concept of Descartes from the 17th century, he thought of pain. If you stick your hand in a fire, pain is this physical thing that flows through a tube to your brain, and your brain realizes then that you took in pain from the outside world. So it's kind of an outside in process and very mechanical. It's like the pain was generated by the fire and then your brain just perceives it. That is so not the case. It's a simplistic way of understanding it based on not really understanding modern neuroscience. We don't have pain sensors per se. We have what we call nociceptors. Nociceptors are like danger signals. They sense danger. So you might have an oil sensor, a temperature sensor is in your car, that it's sensing that the oil pressure, the temperature, whatever you're measuring, air in your tires, it's not normal. But the idea of pain is something that's actually not generated in the peripheral area of the body. It's generated in the brain. And it's not mechanical like this. You can have people with their legs blown off that don't feel pain at all. So it's not automatic that you're gonna have pain. Pain is something that's created by the brain, and that is something that is really on the frontiers now of modern neuroscience. It's a synthesized impression generated in the brain being kind of a computer that is integrating all of these inputs. So if there's a lot of nociception coming in, it goes into the limbic system of the brain, which processes all kinds of inputs, emotional inputs, these physical danger signals, stress, and it puts it all together and decides whether to create a sensation of pain or not. I think of pain as kind of like your smoke alarm going off. It's just an alarm signal that is telling you to pay attention. Now, Lorimer Moseley, a physiotherapist in Australia, who I pay a lot of attention to, he's one of the foremost researchers in pain. He says very concisely that pain is an output, not an input. In other words, it comes from the brain. It doesn't go into the brain. And another thing that he says is soft tissue damage is neither necessary nor sufficient for pain. You can have that gross trauma where you aren't feeling pain at all. And you can have a situation where you're in horrible, terrible pain. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your tissues. Both are very, very common scenarios. Yet we seem to ignore that in the medical system, and everybody tries to explain pain by means of disease or injury. Well, that breaks down with these chronic pain people that are in pain all the time and they can't find anything wrong. And that's very, very common. When you're a body worker, you treat pain, you're going to see many, many, many of these cases. So he says it's really that opinion rendered by the brain. Are we in a dangerous situation or not? And that opinion is determined by the state of upregulation or downregulation. So if you're upregulated, it means your system is being very, very sensitive. If you're downregulated, it's sort of a normal state where it would take, an actual acute injury. Now, if you hit yourself in the hammer, of course, you're going to feel pain because, it's a relatively modest injury, but the nociception will flow to the brain, and the brain says, yes, this is an acute injury, and that will generate pain. However, that idea breaks down when it's no longer acute. Let's say you sprain your ankle and you tear some ligaments. Well, you will feel pain, you'll have swelling, you will have many indications that there was an actual injury, discoloration, and so on. Now, 6 months later, if you're still feeling pain, which is very common, that's no longer due to the tissues because the tissues will heal in a couple of months. If you're feeling pain at that point, that's going to be due to something different. That is, it went into a chronic state and your nervous system is now upregulated. And so it's now paying a lot of attention and generating pain all the time. Because you have trigger points. When you have an acute injury like that, the body uses trigger points to stabilize. So you stretch muscles very suddenly. That's a way to produce trigger points. Trigger points happen usually from some form of acute or chronic overload. And as we saw, the trigger point, for example, in the side of your lower leg, the peroneal muscles, can generate pain that will feel like it's right over that area where you strained your tendon. So, it can be very confusing, and everybody's going to think, yeah, it's about the tendons or the ligaments, but it isn't. So that's where you really have to understand this worldview to understand the true origins of pain. So neuroplasticity is this incredible ability of the brain to upregulate or downregulate. So you can rewire. Your brain has the ability to change its own wiring in a matter of minutes. If things start happening and there's a lot of new nociceptive input coming in, very quickly the brain's going to start to put new connections into place. We call those synaptic connections. And those are going to feed more and more of the nociceptive input into the brain because it figures this is a dangerous situation and I need to pay attention. So that state of upregulation then can set up chronic pain because then you have all these listening synapses and you're experiencing pain a lot, and the injury and the tissue damage is probably even less than it was before, but the sense of pain is there. The body will actually then use trigger points. And trigger points can add, in addition to being stabilizers, because those taut fibers will stabilize the joint. So if you want to, if you hurt yourself, if you twist your ankle, taping up your ankle allows it to not move as much. Well, the same thing can be achieved by the body putting taut fibers into the trigger points, the muscles that cross that joint, your peroneal muscles and your tibialis anterior and so on. And so, trigger points have a use. And I see it often that it's this situation of perceived injury. It's kind of a misperception that the brain gets into.